Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. We're going to give it a few seconds to let everyone settle and get set up. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Lake, and I am the Health and Wellness Coordinator here at NESS. Our webinar today is Adapting Activities for Individuals with Down Syndrome as Alzheimer's Disease Progresses. Whether you're a parent, sibling, professional, or friend, your role as a caregiver matters deeply, and we're excited to have you here with us today. This is the last webinar in our caregiver webinar series. You can watch all the recordings of the webinars we hosted this month on the NDSS website. You can find a link to that page in the chat as well. Today, we are going to explore how Alzheimer's disease develops. Individuals with Down syndrome gradually lose the ability to independently do personal care activities, as well as hobbies they used to enjoy. This webinar will provide strategies to modify and adapt personal care and leisure activities throughout the stages of Alzheimer's disease, while ensuring the safety of the individual as well as the caregiver. Before we dive into the content today, I'm going to go over just a few housekeeping items. First, if you experience any technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat function to notify our support team, and we will do our best to assist you. Our presenter will answer questions at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions using the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your screen. If we are not able to answer your questions during the webinar, please email us at health@ndss.org. You can find that email in the chat as well. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the NESS YouTube channel within the next few days. You will also receive a link to the recording. So we're going to go ahead and get started. NESS's mission is to create a world where individuals with Down syndrome thrive. NESS does this by driving policy change, providing resources, engaging with local communities, and shifting public perceptions. Our work is achieved through 4 key pillars: resources and support, research, advocacy and policy, and community engagement. I mentioned earlier that I'm on the health and wellness team. The health and wellness team creates a variety of resources such as guidebooks, web pages, one-pagers, and webinars such as this one. I encourage you to sign up for our health and wellness newsletter. You can find that link in the chat, so that way you can stay up to date on all new resources and events. Some of our resources I'm going to highlight today is that we have an Alzheimer's disease and Down syndrome guidebook, a practical guide for caregivers. And we also recently launched our Care Down Syndrome initiative. It is an educational resource hub for primary care professionals. And the course and reference articles include information on Alzheimer's disease. So we encourage you to share that resource with your healthcare team. I am very excited about our speaker today, Dr. Katie Frank. Dr. Frank has worked as an occupational therapist at the Adult Down Syndrome Center since 2016 and in the field of occupational therapy since 2001. She has earned her OT degree from St. Louis University and her PhD in disability studies from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Dr. Frank's experience includes treatment and evaluation, as well as facilitating groups for people with Down syndrome, conducting trainings for staff, families, and caregivers, and offering a variety of other educational opportunities internationally. She is also the immediate past president of DISMIG USA. Dr. Frank, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lake, and everyone else at the National Down Syndrome Society. I am so excited to be here today. Let's get this going. All right, perfect. So today's objectives, we're just going to talk about how, just with aging, how we can see this progression of assistance that is going to be required. I'm going to talk a lot about strategies today and provide some examples, provide equipment recommendations, and just share a variety of resources. So this is where I work. I work at the Adult Down Syndrome Center in Park Ridge, Illinois. If you've ever flown in or out of O'Hare Airport, you've probably flown right over our clinic. We opened in 1992, and see individuals with Down syndrome ages 12 and older that live within the state of Illinois. We have 4 full-time physicians, as well as myself as an OT. We have a social worker, we have advocates, a research and education manager, our clinical team, our front desk staff, and even a volunteer with Down syndrome. There are probably like 25 to 30 appointments a day in our clinic because we're primary and specialty care. And we've seen over 6,000, but getting closer to 7,000 people with Down syndrome since we've opened. And then just as a reminder, all of this information is for educational purposes, and I do not endorse any of the products or receive any kickbacks for anything that I talk about in this presentation, nor does my employer, Advocate Health. So how can we best support individuals with Down syndrome? And it's important to understand first how individuals with Down syndrome learn. And we know that if you've met one person with Down syndrome, congratulations, you've met one person with Down syndrome. However, there are some similarities in how many individuals with Down syndrome learn. And the first thing is that many of them are visual learners and do well learning from someone that looks like them. So it's important to pair pictures with spoken words. And you can use videos or visuals or actual pictures. The videos that we have in our resource library, and I'll share the link to that at the end of the session, all star individuals with Down syndrome. You can also record your loved one doing a task and play that back, or actually take photos of them doing something so that they can see the photos of themselves instead of like a board maker photo, which I'm going to be showing a lot of today. We also know that individuals with Down syndrome require simple directions, so we want to tell them what to do instead of what not to do. So you don't want to say, no, don't do that, because then they don't know what else to do. So tell them what to do instead. You can say safe hands, or I like how you have a calm body, or something like that, instead of like, don't hit. Right? And the other thing is you want to avoid using contractions like don't, because that can be confusing. They might not understand that that means do not. And then some individuals with Down syndrome are not as strong with auditory memory and auditory processing, and may have difficulty retaining directions that is only presented verbally. So it's important to allow adequate response time. And this may seem even slower than you or I can even imagine. So a lot of times, thinking like maybe when they were younger or with a different, a sibling, you may have said on the count of 3, we need to put on your shoes. And then you're like 1, 2, 3. Well, for someone with Down syndrome, they are still trying to understand and process that you said we're going to put on your shoes, that they might not have been able to understand that you already started the countdown. So you might say, put on your shoes on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And then you might even want to repeat, put on your shoes. And then the last thing is that individuals with Down syndrome have fewer short-term memory channels. And so you want to break down tasks into smaller steps. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but I want you to think about a task like getting ready for the day program, or maybe getting ready to leave the house, can be really overwhelming. Again, if it's like, it's time to go, get ready, right? And they're like, well, what's that mean? Right? Because they may have to use the toilet and wash their face and brush their teeth and get dressed and maybe even eat breakfast. But then all of those steps require even more steps, like all of the different steps it takes to brush your teeth, right? You have to get the toothbrush and the toothpaste. You have to open the toothpaste, squeeze it onto the toothbrush, maybe rinse it with water, etc. And so it can be challenging for an individual with Down syndrome to do what we're asking, because they just don't know what all the steps are. There's just too many to remember at a time. The other thing to really consider is this continuum of assistance that is needed, that ranges from being dependent to independent, and it can vary from skill to skill and activity to activity. And as dementia progresses, or even the process of aging, someone is going to move from the right of being independent towards the left of the continuum, which is the opposite of what happened when they were younger and you were teaching them these skills. And as they're aging and developing Alzheimer's, their skill levels are going to fluctuate, especially at the beginning. So, what they need today, they may not need tomorrow. And it really can even fluctuate based on the time of the day. So, when we look at this continuum and we go from needing no assistance to maybe supervision, providing prompts, they might need minimal assistance, moderate assistance, maximal assistance, and then full assistance. And these are also words that, if you've ever been in therapy, therapists use this a lot. Doctors might not use it quite as the same as therapists do, but I'm going to go through and describe kind of what all of this looks like. So with no assistance, again, they're going to do everything on their own. I mean, this is when maybe they're waking up on their own, even if they're setting an alarm. They can use like a microwave or air fryer to cook. They're doing all aspects of their shower, including, excuse me, the water. They have no problem setting the temperature, right? But if someone has been diagnosed with dementia or is suspected of dementia, the individual is most likely not at this level at that time. And you've started to already see the changes. Oh, excuse me. So then when it's supervision, they can do, this stuff kind of on their own, but maybe they need someone around for safety, right? So maybe they're using the air fryer or the oven, but an adult caregiver is always there to like make sure they don't burn themselves when they're taking the pizza in and out of the oven. Or maybe they can shower on their own, but someone's supervising to make sure they don't fall when they're getting in and out. And then we have prompts, and there are a variety of prompts that someone can provide. And so the first one is modeling. And anyone can model the appropriate behavior. But again, I mentioned an individual with Down syndrome does best when they see themselves do it or someone that looks like them. So again, that's where having videos of them doing something can be really helpful. And then when we have gestures, it's things like pointing or giving a thumbs up. When we use verbal prompts, we're going to use words for each step and even praise when they're doing what they're supposed to do. The challenge with only using verbal prompts is that it can lead to prompt dependency. So you may have found that your loved one may not initiate a task or do something until you prompt them to do that they literally will sit and wait until you say, brush your teeth or get your toothbrush, and then they'll do it. And then they wait for the next step. And so that's the challenge with the verbal prompts. And then there's visual prompts. So these are those words or pictures that tell someone to do. And I'm going to show you examples of this later on. And these are really good strategies because they can be modified as dementia progresses. And oftentimes you may be using more than one of these at a time, right? So you might use visual and verbal prompts with a gesture, right? So with washing hands, if you were going to model it, you might wash your hands next to them, or again, use a video about washing hands or a video of them washing their hands. You may actually point to the faucet to turn on the water and then point to the soap. And again, not using any words, you're just pointing. If you were to use the verbal prompts, you're going to tell them, turn on the water, put soap in your hands, rub your hands together. Or if you're going to use that visual prompt, it's that picture of each step. And again, you may use multiple prompts together. Then you've got minimal assistance. So they're doing a lot of the work, but they still need a little bit of help. So maybe you're providing hand over hand assistance when they're doing something, like again, thinking about brushing teeth. Even if they're not aging, maybe this is when they're learning to brush their teeth, or they don't like to do it for thoroughness. They say they did it and it's not very thorough. You might have them hold the toothbrush and then you put your hand on top and then help them brush. But you can also do hand underhand assistance, which is a strategy where your hand goes on the toothbrush first, their hand goes on top, and then they direct you in brushing their teeth. And that can be a way for you to understand how much they understand of the whole process of brushing their teeth, how much pressure they're applying, things like that, to help you then support them in being more efficient in that task. If we've got moderate assistance, it's 50-50. So you're doing half the work, they're doing half the work. So maybe you're setting up the clothes for them, but they get the shirt on without help. And maybe they can put on their pants and like their underwear, but they need help with their balance so that they can pull them up. Or they support themselves for balance and you pull up the clothes. We have maximal assistance. So then you as the caregiver are providing 75% of the support and they are doing 25% of the work. So maybe you put the shirt on over their head and then they put their arms in, right? They put their feet into the pants, but you pull it up. Maybe with toileting, they can still tell you that they need to go to the bathroom, but then you're helping them maybe get on and off the toilet or with wiping and with clothing management. So those are examples of maximal assistance. And then full assistance is they need 100% physical support. So that's transfers. That's everything with self-care. I mean, they might even be on a feeding tube or have a catheter. I kind of went through that fast because I think it's more important for us to talk about these strategies and then to give examples because I want to make sure there's also time for questions. So in doing these activities and thinking about how we support an individual and think about at this progression continuum, we want to think about three strategies. One, activity or task analysis. Two, visual supports. And three, the sensory system. So remember I mentioned that individuals have fewer short-term memory channels. So it's important that we break down tasks into individual steps. And this is like the bread and butter of what OTs do. Because you have to consider what each of these steps entail when it comes to like the fine motor skills, the motivation, the sequencing of the task, the motor planning. I mean, there's so many things. And then when we think about supporting an individual, maybe with like their self-care skills, we can think about breaking down these tasks into simpler steps, right? So here with getting dressed, you might need to tell them, get your new clothes, remove your dirty clothes, put on your undergarments, things like that. And they might be able to do this. But we might need to even make it even simpler steps, right? So maybe you're just already getting their new clothes for them. You'll put their dirty clothes away when they take them off. And you're going to say, like, put on your underwear, put on your t-shirt or put on your bra, right? And you're handing that to them. You also can do things where they maybe only do the very like first two steps of the activity or maybe like the last two steps to keep them engaged. So again, as they get older and dementia progresses, they're going to be less involved, but you still want to keep them as active as possible. So perhaps it's like again, putting the shirt on over their head and helping them put their arms through, but so that they can do that. And the thing is you might not need them to complete every step, and that's okay. But again, just helping them stay engaged and involved as best as they can. And then there's visual supports. And these are pictures, words, or other images that can really help support an individual because it might help them communicate. It can help share or manage expectations. It can provide reminders or offer choices, and it can maintain skills and independence. And what's really great is that it can help accommodate for that slower processing time, and it can break tasks down into simpler steps. It tells you exactly what to do, and it pairs with the spoken word. So visual supports are perfect for all of those reasons that I said, like how individuals with Down syndrome learn best. And so they help us all learn. We all use them. Visual supports are not childish, even though you might see an adult with Down syndrome say, I use that in school. I don't want to do that. They don't have to have pictures. They can just be words. It can be a list. We all have grocery lists on our cell phone. We know what app we want by the picture. We don't read it. So we all utilize visual supports throughout the day. So they are not necessarily childish, but they can help provide or establish structure and routine. And we know that individuals with dementia, structure really helps them manage their day better and they just function better. So that's a perfect reason to use some kind of visual support. They can provide memory and comprehension strategies, especially important as someone ages. Again, I have a grocery list. I have a calendar. We, all do things like that. And so those are memory and comprehension strategies. The visual supports can lessen the battle between the parent and caregiver or the person with Down syndrome. And this is because the visual becomes the bad guy, not the person asking them for something to be done. So mom or sister no longer seem like they're nagging. It really can lessen the power struggle. It can help teach or show what to do, which again is really important for how individuals with Down syndrome learn. It can provide motivation. So first we're going to do this and then we're going to do that. And the first thing is the activity they don't want to do. And the then is the activity or the whatever it is that's really motivating for them. It can provide opportunity to offer choices. So individuals with Down syndrome don't always know that they have choices because even when they're in school, they're constantly told, do this, do this, do this. At home, often that's the case. And so they don't know that they can make decisions. And so visuals can help with that. And I'm going to show you examples of all of this. And then again, the final thing is that it eliminates that need to process instructions that they hear. So what do visuals look like in order to help communicate? Here's one that's just a generic, honestly, communication board that has a variety of things on it that is available in our resource library. It has some feelings, it has about pain, hungry, like simple needs or requests. We have one about emotions. Here's one that's just like an I want. And so you can create this about things that they may need or things that are more individualized to them. When we want to share or manage expectations, here's the first then that I mentioned. And again, the first is the preferred activity and the first is the non-preferred activity and the then is the preferred activity. So maybe they really hate to shower, but they love listening to music. So you say, first we're going to shower and then we can listen to music. Again, if they hate showering and you want them to shower 3 times a week, you create like a little calendar. And this can be on Velcro. So the icons on the bottom go into the calendar and maybe they shower Monday, Wednesday, Friday that week. And so when it's Monday and there's that icon that says take a bath or shower, you can say, oh, it's Monday, it's a shower day. And then again, hopefully that can lessen that power struggle. It might not do it right then, and we'll talk about a time of day that could be best for some more challenging activities. But they know at some point today, I'm in a shower. So you can say, do you want to shower now or at lunch or now or at bedtime, right? And give them that choice. Maybe it's just a simple reminder of what they need to do in the bathroom before they head downstairs. Or it could be their evening routine, right? And this is just an example of one person's, but again, it would be something that would be more individualized about everything they need to do before they fall asleep. Visual supports can provide reminders or offer choices. So this is an example of an orientation book that we have a template for in our resource library. Because again, as individuals age or develop dementia, they're going to be more forgetful. So maybe they need a picture of where they eat, or maybe it's just their place at the table, right? Or where their room is. And then you can also label their room with the picture that's like my room. Again, just to provide those reminders. They may benefit from timers. So you can use the timer on your phone or on your tablet or on your stove. But on the right, that's a timer that you can use on your phone that's a visual timer instead of just setting the timer and having it beep, right? As the time gets closer to ending, the duck appears. So then they know that that's when they're expected to do something. The timer on the left is a timed timer. Again, a different type of visual timer. So the red disappears when the time is up. Sometimes stop signs can be very helpful. So maybe they're at risk for eloping and you put a stop sign on the door and they see it and they may not open the door to leave. Or a stop sign on the refrigerator if they tend to try to get food in between meals and they're not supposed to. This is an example of a choice board. So, the green boxes would be the 3 choices that they want. Again, there's Velcro there and the 8 options at the bottom. I mean, they don't have to be 8, but in this one, there's 8 options on the bottom that they can do. And so they can come home and decide what 3 they're going to do that day. They put them at the top and then they know these are my choices, these are my activities. And then the parent or caregiver doesn't have to tell them like, why don't you color and then walk the dog and then look at your books, right? The person can be more independent and structured when they get home. And then for some, again, maybe they need to drink more water or drink less pop. right? And so a visual, something like this could just be that reminder of how much water they're supposed to drink, or if they only get one pop a day or something like that. Or we had one individual who had to, he liked calling his family. Um, he lived in a group home, and so we created that calendar for when he could call them and at what time, because even though he knew and he could tell you exactly who he calls on what day and at what time, he wanted to call them more often. So then this was just that reminder. And then again, we can maintain skills and independence. And obviously, we want to do this as long as possible. So whether maybe they were independent before, but now kind of they've moved to needing some of those prompts. So here's that visual prompt for the shower routine of all the steps. So this can be laminated and hung in the shower to remind them all the steps of their shower. It's using the bathroom. Maybe they've started forgetting to wipe, whether it's brushing teeth, could even be washing your hands. And we have a variety of different visuals like this for different self-care skills in our resource library. So we've talked about task analysis, we've talked about visuals, and I want to wrap up real fast before we talk about more specific strategies about our sensory system. And I want you to think about your sensory system being like electrical wiring. And here, the wiring is intact and the light remains on. And I'm going to let you know that this next slide has a flickering light. And so if you are prone to seizures or can be triggered by flashing lights, I ask you to please look away or close your eyes for about 15 seconds, and then I will turn the slide and let you know when it's no longer showing. But when there's a kink in that wire, it could cause our lights to flicker. And this ends up sending mixed messages from our brain to where they need to go in the rest of our sensory system. All right, I have changed the slide. And it makes it really hard for us to understand what we're experiencing via like our taste, our touch, our sound, the smell, everything just is different. Some sensations may feel more intense and others may be less so, or some things just don't feel right. So like we have something that's small and smooth and circular, and we don't know if it's a penny or a button. And this can impact our behavior. So we might see verbal outbursts or physical aggression or slowing down or shutting down. And also as we age, there are natural changes to our sensory system with our hearing and our vision and our balance. So these are all important things to consider. And so here is a resource that we have in our resource library adapted from Champagne, who she identified this for just individuals with Alzheimer's disease. And so we kind of made it a little bit more specific to Alzheimer's disease and an intellectual disability. But it's important to know that we may need to consider sensory strategies before a task that can be a little overwhelming. Or maybe it's to calm them after they've become overwhelmed and we weren't expecting it. Or maybe it can help alert them in order to participate the activity. So again, we're going to use calming strategies for someone who's worked up and alerting strategies for someone who is slowing down or shutting down. And these are just some examples. There are other things, but this goes through some of the different sensory systems and activities that we can do. But it's important to consider these because it could help us best support an individual as they age. So now for the last, I bet I have about like 20 minutes, I think, before questions. Let's really go through examples of this. And then even more things like home modifications and things for home safety. So it's important to know that as Alzheimer's disease progresses, it's common to develop difficulty eating or swallowing foods or liquids safely. And it's because the individual may not remember that they've eaten, or if they haven't eaten, how to properly chew or swallow, how to recognize thirst or hunger cues. We know that their cough reflex weakens, and it may take them longer to eat, and therefore they're at risk for weight loss. So what are some things we can do to help that? Let's just give them more time to eat. It's okay. We don't have to rush them through meals. Perhaps we're giving them smaller portions and feeding them more frequently throughout the day. If they aren't using utensils, it's okay to provide finger foods. We want to make sure that the food is already cut into bite-sized pieces or even smaller than bite-sized pieces. While they're eating, we just want to observe for changes in swallowing. Make sure they're not coughing or gagging while eating. You might want to consider using adaptive equipment, which I'll show you some examples in a little bit. Again, thinking about the environment, maybe avoiding extra noise when eating. So turning the TV off, limiting conversation. Maybe you'd have like calming music playing softly, right, to help them stay relaxed, but that's not overwhelming them. And then contrast between the plate and the table and the food and the plate. So you don't want like a beige food like toast on a beige plate, on a beige placemat, on a beige table, because they're not going to be able to see the food. So if you have neutral food, think about the plate color, the placemat, things like that. And I'll show you examples again at the end. These are the slides I just wanted on here, but I'm not going to read through these for sake of time, but you will have access to them to know what it could look like as you progress through that continuum of assistance. When it comes to bathing, it's common maybe to see more trouble stepping into or out of the tub or shower. They become more scared of the water. Perhaps they don't want to put their head back, which could also be something that we see even when someone doesn't have dementia or is aging, and unable to follow the steps to wash themselves without assistance. So what are some things we can do? We can use medical equipment like shower chair or a transfer tub bench and grab bars. So the difference between a shower chair and a transfer tub bench is that a transfer tub bench is something that can be used when you have a tub with a shower curtain. It's not really feasible to use with shower doors. And it's a little bit longer. So it's more like a bench than a chair. And two of the legs sit outside the tub and the other two are inside. And you can literally like back up and sit on the bench and then swing your legs in and scoot your bottom over. And then the same to get out. And so it just makes it a little easier if they aren't able to step in and out of a tub anymore, you can use this transfer tub bench. Using a handheld shower head really helps individuals, really of any age. This is going to help if they don't like to put their head back. It can also help because it's not that individuals with Down syndrome as they age develop macular degeneration, but their vision almost becomes like that, where they become so focused on something they don't really know what's happening around them. And so imagine if your vision's like this and all of a sudden you have water coming at you, and that can be really scary. Right. And so if they can see the handheld shower head and then they can wash their body, it's not going to be as scary for the water to be hitting them. Maybe a visor to keep water off the face. You can sponge bathe as needed. Use dry shampoo, or even these shampoo caps, and I put an example of a brand there. Again, I've never used these, but these are waterless shampoo caps that you can you put it on and then you actually like you're washing hair, you kind of do this and then you don't have to rinse. And I'm guessing it's like dry shampoo, but in a cap. You really want to make sure that you're telling the person what you're doing. I know I mentioned like try to use fewer words, but it's going to help them again know what's happening. I don't know if you've ever been to like the dentist or something and they're just like in your mouth and you can't see what's happening and they're not telling you what you're doing, and it can be pretty anxiety provoking. So again, if you're just talking them through what's happening, that can be really helpful. And you want to consider the time of the day any task is completed, but especially something like bathing that can be pretty strenuous. You want to do it at a time where they're more alert, they're feeling good, right? And so that it doesn't, if they're already entering the task exhausted or fatigued and you're trying to do this, it's just going to make it harder on both of you. So just really consider the time of day that you're doing something strenuous. And again, here's an example of what that progression of assistance may look like. We also know that dressing can become more difficult. They might have trouble stepping into or out of their pants or underwear, or balancing in order to pull up their lower body clothing. They may be sensitive to textures, so they could develop an aversion to certain fabrics or even different types of clothing. They're unable to follow the steps to get dressed without assistance, and maybe they just refuse the task because they lack the understanding of why it needs to occur. So what can you do? Just have the person sit when getting dressed. That's going to help a lot with the balance. Consider clothing without fasteners like buttons and zippers, which I'm sure you were already doing. Limit wearing undergarments. If they're not leaving the house, does, your daughter or your sister need to be wearing a bra? Maybe she can just wear like a t-shirt with and a shirt over it, something like that. Again, tell the person what you're doing while you're assisting. If they have trouble selecting the clothes, just set it out for them or give them choices. Do you want this or do you want that? Using the steps for how to get dressed. You can label their dresser or closet. So you can have a visual where like on the dresser drawer, you have a picture of underwear. And then the visual says you put on your underwear. So then they know to go to the underwear drawer to pick out their underwear to put it on, right? And then same with the shirts and the socks and whatever. And so they can match what they need to put on, and that can help them be a little bit more independent. And sometimes it's just easier to remove clothing that's not in season, right? Especially for the individuals who want to wear the same clothes every day, right? So maybe you have 3 of the exact same shirt, 3 of the exact same sweatpants so that you don't have to do laundry every night. But you could also just, it's summer and they don't need to wear that. And so you remove that and only put the summer clothes in. And again, here's your dressing progression. When it comes to walking and balance, we know that as they age, can have difficulty navigating an environment, climbing up or down stairs, or going through doorways. Curbs can be hard. They just start losing strength, and it impacts their ability to walk or even like get up and down from sitting. Their hearing and vision may worsen, which can impact balance and mobility. And maybe they're on medications that cause dizziness. So what can we do? We might just provide handheld assistance. Or perhaps they will need to start using like a rolling walker or some kind of walker or wheelchair. When you are helping them using a gait belt, so that's a belt that goes around their waist, and you can use it to safely help you and them get into standing or to transfer from a chair to a wheelchair or one chair to the other. You want to make sure that you provide adequate lighting and making sure there's not too many shadows. Remove throw rugs and excess furniture just so that if there's throw rugs around, even with the thing underneath that's supposed to keep it from moving, you can still trip like at the edges of the throw rug. So just get rid of them. And then if there's too much furniture, even though they may like it because it gives them more furniture to hold while they're walking, it's really also just giving them more opportunity to trip. Making sure that they're wearing supportive, well-fitting footwear, having chairs with armrests so that they can push off the armrest to help them sit and stand. You also want them to scoot towards the edge of the chair because that's going to give them more momentum if they lean forward to stand up. If we tried to all stand up with our bottom at the back of the chair, it's very hard. And just consider using additional lighting in bathrooms and stairwells. And here's your mobility progression, what it may look like. And again, this is not all encompassing. When it comes to toileting, memory impairment may lead to difficulty interpreting the bathroom cues or the urge to use the restroom. They may not remember where the bathroom is. They may not be able to ask for help, and they might have trouble sequencing the toileting routine. So perhaps you provide verbal reminders to use the bathroom, or you can have an alarm go off every like 2 hours or 3 hours, and that will be the cue for them to go to the bathroom. You want to mark the bathroom door so they can identify it. Maybe adding contrast to the toilet. So again, thinking about what we talked about with food, having a white toilet on a white floor against a white wall, they might not know where like the toilet seat is. So maybe you change the toilet seat to some bright color so that they know that that's where they need to sit. Perhaps limiting fluids before bedtime just to make sure they don't have to get up in the middle of the night. Using a 3-in-1 toilet or a urinal. So I'll show you an example of the 3-in-1 toilet. It's also called a bedside commode. So it can be a bedside commode. You can take out the bucket and then put the frame over a toilet, and then it becomes a raised toilet seat. Or you can also put it into a shower. So that's the 3-in-1. Maybe you use chucks when they're laying in bed. So those are like what they use in the hospital underneath. So if they were to have an accident, you're going to be that's all going to go into the chuck and hopefully not on the linens. You might need to use adult diapers. And using flushable wipes when assisting with hygiene, but knowing that even if they say they're flushable, I would not recommend flushing them um, because they don't necessarily do well in our pipes. And when it comes to hygiene, we can see challenges with things like brushing teeth or shaving or cutting nails. And it's because they might develop increased sensitivities to textures and sounds or unable to follow the steps or just refusal again because they don't know why it needs to happen. So one thing that's really important to consider is to avoid completing hygiene tasks in front of a mirror. As a person develops with dementia, they don't realize that the person looking back at them is themselves. And so they can think that it's a stranger and it can be very alarming. So it's important to consider that and also to try to remove mirrors from around where the individual kind of goes. You might want to use an electric toothbrush or even a three-sided toothbrush. And here's an example of that three-sided toothbrush. Because then if they're just doing it, it's all getting all three sides of the teeth at once. Um, there is also something that someone told me about recently that's more like a retainer that you can use to brush your teeth. But I think as they age, that's probably not as good of idea. Just thinking about putting that in someone's mouth if they're gagging more easily, like it could just be awkward. You can use floss picks or uh, a water pick. Maybe if you still need to do some hair removal, thinking about Nair or some other cream. You can use rotating or automatic clippers. This picture is an example of one of the automatic clippers. They have a bunch of different brands on Amazon. They're great for fingernails, not so great for toenails because individuals with Down syndrome tend to have the toenail fungus, and so their toenails are a lot thicker. But these automatic clippers are pretty safe. It limits how far in you can put your finger, and it does cut your nail. Um, if they don't like having their hair brushed or combed, do it when it's wet. Just think about picking and choosing your battles. If it doesn't have to be done that day, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the day. And again, consider the time of day that tasks are completed because again, they might be more willing to do it. Maybe if they don't want to do it then, they'll do it later. Sleep can become dysregulated, and so they might mix their days and nights or want to nap throughout the day. They might refuse to go to sleep. They could be slow to fall asleep, or maybe they wake up in the middle of the night and have trouble falling back to sleep. So thinking about having a dark room and closing curtains, maybe having a sound machine playing so that it eliminates all the other sounds, especially if they're supposed to be asleep and other people are awake in the house. If you have that sound machine, maybe they won't notice the other people being awake, and it won't disrupt their sleep. Maybe sleeping with a favorite object, if it's a stuffed animal or a blanket or something like that. You may eventually need to put bed rails so that they don't fall out of the bed, maybe even a bed alarm. You can also put this like in a wheelchair so it clips onto them. And then if they were to get out of bed, the alarm goes off because the clip will come off of them. Maybe putting a sheet horizontal under the person so that you can use that extra sheet to pull them if you have to adjust them in their bed. And I showed you this before, but maybe like labeling the bedroom with a photo of them so they know that it's theirs. When it comes to leisure activities, I really want you to think about focusing on enjoyment more than achievement, right? Especially as they age and dementia progresses. Um, so these are a variety of activities that they might like to do, and you might just need to adjust the activities to the disease stage they are in. So you might need to introduce more repetitive tasks. So maybe they used to do, like look at the old photos and they used to talk about all of them. But now maybe they're just going to look at them and not talk. And then maybe they're going to sort them, or maybe they're going to start transferring items back and forth in their hands or from one box to another. Maybe they'll stack things, and that's okay. It's not about achieving, it's just about doing something they enjoy. And be prepared that the person is going to eventually take a more passive role in these activities. And then again, thinking about when agitation may occur, because you might start to see patterns. And so then if it's, let's say, late in the afternoon, you're going to maybe plan some diversionary activity or, add that sensory play at a time when you think they might become agitated so that you can kind of try to prevent or limit that agitation. Again, some more strategies with leisure, just providing support and cues. You might just need to allow more time for these activities to be completed. Be realistic. Things are going to take longer, so maybe take more breaks. Break things down into smaller tasks. Do what you can to let the individual feel useful and helpful. Really relax your expectations. No need to criticize or correct. If they're doing it and they seem to be enjoying it, just let them do it however they're doing it, whether it's right or wrong, as long as it's safe. Involve that person through conversation, talk to them about what you're doing. So maybe they really like to have their hands massaged with lotion. So tell them what you're doing. Talk about, oh, the lotion smells like flowers. I mean, whatever it is, because then you're also providing that sensory experience where then they can start smelling and being like, oh, yes, that is what I remember flowers smelling like, or, something like that. And if it doesn't work once, it's okay. Try again later because it might just be the wrong time of day and not the activity itself. Or thinking about that activity analysis, you'll think about breaking that task down into even simpler steps and just taking one step at a time. And then lastly, I really want to focus on some of these home modifications and equipment that I talked about. So those contrasting colors in the bathroom. Here you can see that difference about the white on white on white, but if you just change the toilet seat, how much easier that is. Again, making sure there's adequate lighting in rooms and hallways, removing those mirrors and furniture, adding handrails and ramps, maybe adding reflective tape on stairs. So whether it's hardwood or carpet or whatever it might be, it's again all those same colors. So the riser and the step are the same. So maybe if you put a reflective tape or something at the edge of the step, then they can identify where that step ends. And then really, having that walk-in shower versus the tub shower. But if you need the tub shower and I would remove the doors, get a shower curtain and a transfer tub bench. We talked about making sure chairs have armrests. We talked about removing throw rugs, maybe even the door sills if you can. Again, that's just one more thing to trip over. It could also be something that as their vision changes, they see that as a barrier and they won't even go through the door. So that would be another reason to remove it. If elopement is an issue, maybe adding a deadbolt out of reach or an alarm on any of those main doors. Make sure you're locking up all medications and cleaning supplies. Removing locks on interior doors to prevent the person from locking themselves in. Closing the curtains at night, because again, that's going to cause shadows. And turning down the volume on the TV before changing channels, because, from channel to channel, the volume, even if it's set the same, could sound different. And so that can be really alarming or overwhelming for someone. So we're trying not to startle them. I talked about some adaptive equipment. So you could use weighted utensils. These are really great because again, even though they might be getting weaker, if it's proprioceptive input that we're providing with the weighted utensil, so like the handle of the utensil is a little heavier, and then they know like, oh, I have something in my hand. Because if you were to give them like a plastic utensil, it feels like nothing and they could just drop it. Could consider some adapted plates. So the gray one has those partitions in it so that you can keep the food separated. The blue one has a higher lip, so that's going to help you load your utensil because you can use your spoon or fork and push it all the way up the lip and then it goes on the fork. Again, thinking about those contrasts, here you've got a white piece of cake on a white plate on a white table, and they just change the color of the plate and then the cake stands out more. You might want to use cups with lids, long-handled sponges. Here is an adapted toothpaste dispenser that is similar to adapted automatic soap dispenser. So with this toothpaste dispenser, you just put your toothbrush under there, the toothpaste loads, and then you can brush your teeth without making a mess. As far as medical equipment, you might want to consider a shower chair or handheld shower head. And here in that picture, you can see bars around the toilet, a seat in the shower, the handheld shower head. The bottom or that middle picture is that 3-in-1 commode that again you can use with the bucket as a bedside commode. You can remove the bucket, put it over the toilet as just a raised toilet seat. Raised toilet seats can be hard for individuals with Down syndrome because their legs don't touch. So then maybe just having the railings is going to be easier and probably not having an ADA compliant toilet because they're just too tall. We talked about gait belts and wheelchairs, maybe a rolling walker or a standard walker. This blue sheet is that patient transfer sheet, or again, you can just use a sheet on your own and put it on top of the bed so that you can pull them. You may need to consider the hospital bed, um, again, as they age. It's important to remember to provide simple instructions. Do not argue. You're not going to win. Try to avoid asking them if they remember because that can just be more frustrating for them. Smile, even when you don't want to. Try not to raise your voice. Speak calmly with a slow pace and get down on their level. And remember not to ask too many questions or make too many statements at once, and use pictures when you can. So today, I really hope that you understand that as an individual ages, a change in functional status occurs, and that happens for all of us. The more assistance may be needed to help an individual with Down syndrome as they decline in skills. It's important to ensure safety of the individual, but as well as the caregiver when providing support, and keep the environment calm, predictable, obvious, familiar, and safe. So I mentioned there were resources. Here are just some from the Adult Down Syndrome Center. That is our QR code for the whole resource library. Um, I had mentioned some like this when I get dressed. So those are the pictures that you could use, and then you would have those same pictures on your drawer. We have a whole thing about bathing and showering and tips for going up and down steps safely, but you can see, you can sign up for our email list or follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Lake already shared some of this, but NDSS has some great resources for aging and Alzheimer's disease, but also the Down Syndrome Scotland has one, and the Canadian Down Syndrome Society, just as a variety of information. And then here's my contact information. You are always welcome to email me with any questions, especially if we don't get to all of them today. But I think I left 8 minutes. That's not too bad. So I am ready to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frank. This was a lot of really valuable information. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature, or you can use the chat to send us your questions. We had one question come in about your thoughts on maybe in the early stages of the disease or upon first receiving the diagnosis on maintaining routine or activities. Like if someone is attending a day program, should they stay in the day program? At what point might they stop attending? Things like that.
Absolutely. I do think it's important to keep routine as long as possible. We also know that that can help prevent decline faster. So if we all of a sudden got this diagnosis, but it was really early on, and we're like, okay, we're going to take them out of everything they're used to, and then they're just sitting at home, we're probably going to see the decline faster. So keep that routine as long as possible. You'll start realizing like maybe they'll just tell you they don't want to go anymore. You'll find that they want to sleep more, they don't want to get out of bed. And then instead of just stopping them from going to their day program or their job, throw a retirement party, right? Make it more fun. Don't make it seem like it's this bad thing that they can't go. Just be like, this is what happens when people turn your age. We retire so that we can, do more things that we enjoy doing. And I think that can be kind of put a positive spin on them not being able to do the things that they once enjoyed doing.
I like that idea of throwing a retirement party. That's awesome. Yeah, if there's any other questions, please submit them in the chat or Q&A feature. Let's see, we just got one come through. Oh, someone's just commenting on your knowledge as an OT and how it's a great perspective to consult an OT about adapting these kind of activities.
Yeah. I think I like to joke. I used to give a presentation when I worked in pediatrics that was OT doesn't stand for the other therapy. And I think a lot of times families want their loved one when they're young to walk and talk, and they kind of forget about all these things that OT can help with. And again, OT really does, I mean, all the therapies cover the lifespan. Um, but I mean, the whole occupation is anything you need to do from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. And an OT can help modify the activity, can help provide accommodations, can help teach new ways to do it. And so I think it's really important that lots of people consider OT as just even aging, whether or not you have an intellectual disability.
We got one more question that asks about what age should caregivers start to kind of look out for this decline of skills, and even maybe without the official Alzheimer's diagnosis, start considering implementing some of these strategies.
I mean, that is more a medical question than an OT question. Um, However, I do know that, um, or I believe, I can't say I know 100% certain, but I believe that a lot of the physicians are recommending doing some screening starting around the age of 40 so that you can kind of get a baseline and see. You will be able to like see more of the changes if you're doing this baseline assessment. So the NTG has an assessment tool that physicians often use to, again, get that baseline. Because families don't necessarily see the decline, even though you're there with them day in and day out. Um, and so it's important even to bring up subtle changes with your healthcare team to see if there's anything further that they should be looking at. These changes do not typically happen before the age of 40 for Alzheimer's. Um, and so we also know that individuals with Down syndrome can be diagnosed with Alzheimer's at all ages by people that are not familiar with the diagnosis of Down syndrome. So if your loved one is in their 20s, this is not Alzheimer's, right? If they can still see a regression of skills or some kind of decline in skills, but it's not Alzheimer's. So also knowing that. Um, but yeah, I mean, around 40 is usually what doctors are recommending to try to just gather that baseline so you can see if there's changes.
And I also put the link to the NTG ESD, which Dr. Frank mentioned, and it's also a great tool for caregivers to help write down and communicate their concerns to a healthcare professional as well.
Thanks. Like the other thing we do have in our resource library that I mean, I don't love watching it because it is hard to watch, but there's a series of videos that's about a person with Down syndrome who has developed Alzheimer's who lives with their sister. And so the two of them are interviewed throughout the progression of her of the disease to watch kind of you can see the changes in Colleen, and then you can hear Bo talking about the challenges, or not even all the challenges, because some of the stuff she really has some positive things to say. But you can just hear from their experience, which I think is a really nice resource for families, um, and what may or may not happen, but just to kind of understand and see, you like literally see the changes in Colleen from video to video and how she progresses.
We just got one last question I think we have time for. This is a good question. So a lot of the strategies you mentioned rely on visual or social stories. If someone has vision impairment or low vision, do you have any suggestions on how to go about that?
That is a great question. Um, so depending on the visual impairment, you can make things bigger, right? So they don't have to be very small pictures. And so you can make it like the whole sheet of paper if that's going to help them see things easier. Um, if they have very limited vision, then they've probably already become accustomed to following verbal cues. And so, because we know that when we lose one sense, our other senses kind of kick in. So it's possible that just um, giving those verbal instructions, speaking slowly, giving them time to process may be all that you need. If you couldn't be there, perhaps there's like something that could be recorded that could play for them.
Really great suggestions. That is all the time we have today. A recording of the video, including the Q&A section, will be emailed out within the next week and also available on the NDSS website. When the webinar ends, a short survey will pop up on your screen. Please take that. Your feedback is really important to us. If we did not get to your question, again, please email us at health@ndss.org. You can find that in the chat again. And thank you everyone for attending, and a big thank you to Dr. Frank.
My pleasure. Thank you.